So this week we're going to show our oddball iFan03 install. That's a three-way configuration with the iFan03 installed in the wiring housing of the fan. We're using two Martin Jerry dimmers so we can control the 6 Zemi-Smart downlights in the living room to turn them off and on from the wall on either side of the room, as well as brighten them and dim them, as well as we can turn the fan on and off using long press on actions, and we can change the fan speed using the long press up and down actions on the dimmer. We can see a visual representation of the fan speed with the dimmer status lights, as well as still allow the iFan03 remote to work and show the fan speed on both dimmers at the same time. So let's get to it and show you how we tackled this last piece of the puzzle that's been bugging me for the past year. Checking out the iFan03 from Sonoff. Of course, it does say DIY mode, but we're going to be putting Tasmodo on it, so that's really irrelevant here. Now it does state they are using a 433 megahertz remote this time around instead of the 2.4 gigahertz like in the iFan02. It does have a relay for light control as well as the fan control. Of course, in the US, we had issues with the capacitor size previously. So of course, in the box, you do get the remote. It does include the battery. So pull the back off and the battery's inside, and there's a little tab you pull. Then you have the fan module itself. And the instruction manual we won't be using. So you got the two external antennas, one for 433 megahertz and one for the 2.4 gigahertz on the ESP chip. And then you've got your light output and then your fan output. Now previously with the iFan02, we had to replace the capacitors inside because they're half the size of what they should be for US voltages. I wish they would do another SKU model that would have the US based capacitors. They would definitely sell a lot more of these in the US because a lot of people don't want to start unsoldering capacitors and such from a board out of their iFan03. So Sonoff, if you're listening, should be an easy change. Make a US model that has the correct capacitor size for the 120 volt voltage fans that we use. So if you pry on the wires down here, you can pop the corner off and just run the spudger up and pop the clips. And there she is. And sure enough, there's the two capacitors right here. One's a 2.5 and one's a 3. Typically, what I've seen in the US is some of the fans will need like a 4.5 or 5 or 5.5 or even a 6. So definitely consult what your fan has in it. And many of the fans that I have, you can find the capacitors usually stored in the little housing that has the lighting module wiring. So if you drop the wiring for the lighting, you'll find the capacitor. It's a little brick with a couple wires, and it shows you the run capacitor, and it also shows the speed capacitors as well. So nothing crazy on the back. Of course, they do label the actual headers on the back for you, which is great. And you do need just a straight USB flasher. You don't need any extra power supplies or anything, and the button is actually GPIO 0. So what we'll be doing is we'll be just placing the empty header like we've done on the Sonoff R2 versions and the R3, and just we'll hold the button and we'll flash it with Tasmodo. So a little closer look at the board and the capacitors. These are the 4 relays on the side that flip in the different speeds along with the light. And then of course the ESP is actually located under this shield, which we won't be removing, but it's an ESP8285, which is flashable. So to flash the iFan03, it's actually very simple. Using a standard CH340G TTL USB flasher, you can use the FTDIs or whatever type of model you want to. Just make sure your particular model is set to 3.3 volts. Don't flash it with 5, and do not use the 5 volt pin at all. One easy way I found to flash the unit is to just take a open pin header, use the 4, and put it in the order that you need from the board itself. As remember, we've got ground, TX, RX, then voltage. And we will do a closer zoom here in a minute. I do use an extension cord for USB to make it easier and just plug in, then I plug it into the computer. You can do it with two hands, it's not that hard. And just like we've shown with some of the other smart switches that have the open pin header like this, and I do wish other manufacturers would do this more, it makes it super simple to sell to both crowds that like to use open source plus the ones that don't. So just simply put it in the holes, and usually the tension of the wire pulling down will put pressure on the pins to actually keep them connected. Now don't forget about GPIO 0. Remember, GPIO 0 is the button on the bottom here. Well, a really simple way I found to flash this one is while you're plugging this USB flasher in and applying it power, just simply hold your finger and push the board down on the table and it pushes the button. You can actually hear it click. I don't know if you can hear it on the microphone here. If you want to hold your finger back where you're not touching on the low voltage side of the board, since we're not applying high voltage. Remember, we're not applying high voltage to this while we flash it. Don't do that. Once you have it held down, just plug in the USB and that's your GPIO 0. And once you let it boot up, you can let go and GPIO 0 does not need to be held, and then you can flash it with Node MCU Pi Flasher or whatever type of utility such as ESP tool, etc. So it is that time of the year during this recording. I'd like to take the opportunity on the behalf of PCBWay and myself to wish you a happy holidays or Merry Christmas or whatever it might be, but definitely happy soldering because we're doing DIY projects at various times. And if you're looking into getting into circuit boards and circuit board construction and everything else and don't know just who to use, definitely go check out PCBWay. Their website is very easy to use, lots of different projects. You can even just find another little project and that way you can get your feet wet and see how their products are. So they're running specials all the time. Go check them out, PCBWay. So during the course of the various configuration and installation of the iFan03, the Tasmotizer came out. It's a new cool little way that you can instantly flash Tasmoto very easily over to your devices when you're doing your serial flashing. This is made by several of the developers that help out with the wiki and various other parts and pieces with the Tasmoto project. So it's pretty simple. If you're familiar with doing, say, the ones with the ESP Easy or the Node MCU Pi Flasher, you do just go ahead and pick your COM port. And if you did activate it later, you do hit the refresh button. And the really cool part is if you do hit you can put your own bin file just by hitting the open button and browsing to your bin file. But of course, we like to have things automated. Let's just hit the release button. And at the time of this video, 7.2 is the latest stable release. And you simply hit the button and the drop down will show all the various bin files and you pick the one you want. Also, one huge feature is the backup original firmware. I've always had to go ahead and do that via the command line. I can never remember the exact syntax. I was always having to copy and paste that in. It was really a pain. Well, the backup original firmware is awesome. It's going to back up the original firmware for you in case you do want to go back for some weird reason. But it's there to back it up in case you need to. And then it's going to flash Tasmoto to it. Now, if you do want to go ahead and flash the latest development versions, you can do that as well. And then here's the really cool part, is you can hit the send config button and then you can put in your Wi-Fi information, MQTT information. You want to send over your modules. You want to send over, say you want to send over a template. You can paste in the template from the Blackadder template website, or you can just simply, for our case, you want to send over the iFan03. So we'll find the Sonoff iFan03. You put in your Wi-Fi information, put in your MQTT. It's going to send that information straight over, and that way you don't have to do that, pulling out your phone and getting the access point and trying to type in your Wi-Fi password. That's supposed to be 50 different letters of upper and lowercase so your neighbor doesn't hack you. It's much easier just to copy and paste it and have it send it over through serial configuration. Pretty cool stuff. If you see the guys out there on GitHub or Discord, definitely tell them thanks for the Tasmotizer. So this actual example is the iFan02, but it's going to be the same as the iFan03. So the problem is If you are in the US or another country that is using 120 volts for your power consumption, these are sized for most typical fans using 220 volts. So we'll leave the link down below to purchase some larger size capacitors, and you simply need to unsolder the pads, and you'll simply need to unsolder the pins here, here, and here as the capacitor goes across from solder point to solder point. Now I find sometimes it is easier, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, but actually we will apply solder to the point, heat it up, and it allows it to spread out the heat, and then you can actually pry it up, or with the help of someone else, also you can use a solder wick tool of some sort, or if you do have a vacuum tool, if you do have those, it makes it much easier, and you can remove the solder so you can pry the two capacitors off and simply replace it with the larger capacitors that are sized for the US fan. Now, if you don't need the 120 volt fans, then of course you can skip this step. Just be careful when you're using a tool to pry the capacitor when you are heating it up, that you don't pry it too hard to bend the actual board or rip the actual pad off. You don't want to do that and damage the board. So as we stated, we are using the Martin Jerry dimmer switch, since it does have the 3 buttons, the up, the down, and the toggle button, so you can get a total of 6 actions, so we can control our lights and our fan with the same exact switch module. Now we did flash this with Tuya Convert. We will leave the link down in the description of the video, of course, for all the details on how to use Tuya Convert, as well as with this particular switch, you can also do it with the standard serial flashing with no soldering, which we've covered in the past, which we'll leave down below as well. Now, if you don't really like the look of the Martin Jerry dimmer, there is a little different model that we've covered before, and it does have a little different faceplate to it. It's going to be the same exact switch inside, so you do get that same exact functionality that we will cover. You get your 3 little different buttons, as well as it does have the status lights along the side. We'll leave all the links down to the various switches and parts and pieces and everything down in the description of the video, of course. Now, of course, you don't see me right now because I didn't want my fat head to block the last piece of the circuit, which is going to be the same in the next few frames. So this is your typical 3-way that I find in my home, where the power comes in from one box, the travelers go over to the second box, and then on it goes over to the light. Now, not everybody's wiring is going to be the same, of course, and you will have to possibly adapt, and you may not even be using 2 dimmers like we did. You could do this same example with just 1 dimmer and not in a 3-way configuration. But I just wanted to show this particular issue because it's been bugging me for so long. It's been that last piece of the puzzle that I needed to finish in the home to complete some home automation. Now, we're not showing the grounds here, but of course, please always do hook up your grounds. It's definitely, you don't want to create any safety issues. So first, of course, make sure you do cut off any power and do verify and triple check that the power is cut off before you start digging in any of these boxes. So what we did here first, we're just going to take little baby steps like we always do and tackle it one step at a time. So we remove the first switch. We're going to cap one of the travelers since we don't need that. Since we're basically going to have the 2 switches powered up all the time and power feeding the fan at all times. That way we can have our voice control the fan, plus we do have the remote. Now we'll use the other traveler that's going to continue to carry the power over to the second box. So of course at this point we've removed both switches, and if you did go turn the breaker back on and had everything capped as we show in here, then you would have power supplied to the light or the fan if you have attached that far yet. And it would turn on and be on all the time, no matter if you had, because you don't have any switches in the room to cut it off. So now we're going to add the 2 dimmers. Now you'll notice the brown wire on the dimmer, which is the load wire, which normally goes to the light. We did cap that. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to feed anything, but we just don't want it touching anything else in the box. So the only thing you'll notice now that we've added the dimmers, in each box you're going to add the dimmer is going to get the neutral line hooked up and it's going to get the hot line hooked up. So what happens is the dimmer just becomes really a Wi-Fi button per se. So it's a pre-made button that you can put in the wall and have 6 different buttons. So at this point, you're probably thinking, hey, I can do it with something else other than that Martin Jerry dimmer you always use. Of course, since it is very versatile and the price is great too. But you can use various other products and pieces, or you can build your own little DIY. You're basically wanting to put 3 buttons so you can do your long press actions, or even more, as long as you can get it in the wall and be powered. But this is a pre-made one that's just you can drop in and go. So of course, once I get out the way again, you will notice it's just a simple connection straight over to the Sonoff iFan03 that powers through the hot and the neutral. And then the Sonoff iFan03 has a neutral out, a light out, and a fan out because it does have the ability to turn lights off and on. So if you do want to use a light kit on your fan, hey, that's perfectly great. It will just turn it on and off, but we don't have a light kit on our fan since we have our 6 ZemiSmart downlights. Now, if you wanted to do this with some smart bulbs in the light kit on your fan, great. You can do that as well. Just we'll have to adapt the project a little bit to always have power on the light kit at all times because you don't want to kill the power to your smart lights. So for the rules, and of course I shoved myself up top so we wouldn't be blocking the rules down below. Now if you do use more than one dimmer like we did, you will do the exact rules based in both dimmers. There's not going to be like a primary and secondary dimmer. So for switch 1, a state 2, which remember, switch 1 is going to be the on-off toggle, and then switch 2 is the down button for the dimmer, and then switch 3 is the up button. So it's pretty simple, just 1, 2, then 3. So for state 2, we're going to send a custom topic message to LRoom toggle, which is in turn picked up by Home Assistant that toggles the entire light group on and off. So we have set a group topic in Tasmota, and we've kind of covered that before one of our light control when we did another house with 6 downlights. You just basically go into the console, type in group topic, space, and then put the custom topic you want. And now you can just send one message and all 6 or more or whatever will listen to that topic, as well as you can still have their individual control. So we set that one to that D-Light LRoom for living room. And of course, when we push the button, we're going to send dimmer minus, which dims them all down. And of course, when we push the up button, it's going to send the dimmer plus, and it's going to push the brightness up. So if you followed in previous videos where we did the dimmer control, you can see some of the same concepts are applied. So for the long press on and off of the dimmers, we're going to send over an event to the actual iFan03 called Togg Fan, which we're going to get to that in a little bit, just short for toggle fan. And then on the long press down of the dimmer, we're going to send the fan speed minus to bring the fan speed down, or it does loop back around. So if you do hold it down and it goes down to off, it will loop back around and go to high. And then real simple, this is standard stuff here with the dimmers on rule 3. On the power state, we do change the LED power. We're actually turning the red LED on when the fan is off. So now for the rules in the fan. The way this is going to work, think of the iFan03 is going to be the master of where the state of the fan lives, whether it's on or off or what speed it's on. And as that state changes, it's going to send out its various actions to, say, Home Assistant to update the GUI, as well as it's going to send out status messages to the dimmers. That way it'll set the speed setting on the dimmer status lights. Now, with one addition to the iFan03 versus the iFan02, we do have the ability to control the buzzer sound. And we wanted to give an audio representation of doing the long presses so we could know if we're sending it to fan speed 1, 2, 3, or off. On fan speed data 0, which is going to be off, we're going to do a longer beep, and then we're going to publish to a, again, group topic that the two dimmers belong to. That way we don't have to publish two messages. So we're going to set the dimmer level as 0, which is in turn going to turn the dimmers both off. Now remember, the dimmers are capped, so we're not going to actually send that electrical signal on the dimming, but it does turn the dimmers off, which is in turn going to turn the red LED on, and then the status lights turn off. So great. You can now see on the dimmers that the fan is off, plus you did hear it. And all this works even as you saw with the remote as well, or even if you did control it from the GUI of Home Assistant or whatever type of home automation you use. So simple stuff. Now we're going to go into fan speed 1. We're going to send over a short 1 beep, which is the 1,1, and then we'll publish a 10 of the dimming level to the two dimmers, and that way we light up just the bottom status lights. And then when we go into the medium speed, we'll do a quick 2 beeps, and then we'll send a 50%, which will move us halfway up the status lights. And then sure enough, as you probably guessed it, on fan speed 3 for high, we're going to send over 3 beeps. And then we're going to set both dimmers to 100% to set all their status lights to show. So it gives us a good visual representation of what's happening with the fan. Now some of you may be asking, well, why didn't you do that with the lights or whatever? Well, honestly, with the lights, I can turn the dimming up and down, and I can just simply look and know, are they half dimmed or low dimmed or high dim? I really don't need representation of the lights actually on the dimmer itself. Now the fan, sometimes it's hard to tell whether you set it to low or medium or high. I don't know how many times I've done with, I know several of you have probably done the same thing where you're doing the old pull chains and you're like, well, is it on high or medium? And you cycle all the way through to get to off. That way you know where you're at. Well, that's not a problem with this anymore. We're just going to simply look on the dimmers and see where we're at, or we just change the speed and listen. Well, what about this TOG fan, this event? Well, I did have an issue where we want to do a toggle of the fan. You cannot send just the toggle command over to the fan speed. So we had to do, in essence, our own kind of toggle to turn it on or off, because we just want to long press the button at the bottom on the dimmer and toggle the fan on and off. Now we could have done this by also sending a custom topic over to Home Assistant and have Home Assistant do a fan toggle. But we chose to do it this way, as we like to do a little challenge on rules, and I like to handle as much as I can the rules on these switches itself. It kind of brings that whole true smart switch to things and not just a controllable switch, which really is technically not really a smart switch in my eyes. When that event is sent over, which is that long press on the dimmer, if memory variable 1 is greater than 0, which we will have another rule that's going to set that variable, then it sends over a fan speed 0. So simply saying, hey, is the fan 1, 2, or 3? Well, then go ahead and set it to 0 and turn the fan off. And then, of course, same thing. If on the TOG fan, if the variable 1 equals 0, then it's going to send the default we want to turn back on to medium. That way we would, if we did turn it off, it would turn back on medium speed, which is typically where we run this fan. So on the iFan03 remote, there is a spot to turn the lights on and off. So what better? And we did also cap, on my particular installation, I did cap the light output because I did not have a light kit on the fan. So now when I do push the remote button to turn the light on and off with the remote, it does bring the relay on. Well, also we do publish that same power value over to the lights, and that way we can just hit the button and cut the light on and off if we wanted to in the living room, just naturally, much like we would. It kind of still all follows in that rule of never remove functionality while adding functionality. So it makes it very natural that if you do have a remote control for your fan and it has these speeds plus a light, well, that light button should turn the lights on and off. And then last but not least, we do have when the fan speed changes, it does publish the value of that fan speed to that memory variable. So we could use it in those if commands in the previous rule. So it's got a lot of different rules here. It's not very confusing, but basically in a nutshell, you just have the fan that's the master controller, and then it tells everything else, hey, here's how you set your statuses to show what state we're in for various fan speeds. And then on the opposite side, you do have the dimmers simply pushing their commands for their long press and short presses to our lights and our fan. So that's all there is to it. And I know I'm just saying that's all there is, but this one's been bugging me for a long time. The wife's been on me about wanting to control the fan using voice assistants and using the wall, and because we had just automated everything in other rooms, and the one living room item was just a huge thorn in my side, and I was finally able to get it done based on some various things I did learn doing other projects. So it's always cool to take one project and adapt it into others. So if you do that in various projects that we do, because you don't have to always follow exactly what we do, be sure and share it down in the comments down below, or come join us out in Discord and share all your cool products, like this one. And yeah, it may look kind of weird, but it is a very cool project using well, we'll just leave the link down below and we'll show it. So I appreciate everybody watching and subscribing and whatever it else might be. Definitely give us a thumbs up on the video, share it, do whatever you can do to help us out. And I appreciate all the Patreon subscribers. It is a big help of bringing various projects to the channel each month. Well, if you're not already a subscriber, definitely hit the button down below. If you want to smash it, that's all you. And hit that bell icon and catch us in our next video and our live stream. And y'all take care.